Hi, welcome to our second episode of Gruesome Twosome Reviews. I'm Jay Gruesome.
And I'm Jay Putrid.
And this is the show to go to for horror and cult reviews, especially if you want to know about lesser mentioned cinema. So to get a better feel of what we consider good cinema, we've decided to make up a list. And for this list, we thought that it would be appropriate, since we're a couple, to start off with date night movies. So, we picked some movies that are in the erotic thriller genre. And first we'll do our honorable mentions. So we chose Creature from the Black Lagoon.
That's actually a really good beginning point, obviously, because it's literally, creature falls in love with girl, creature decides to abduct girl and reproduce.
And, a lot of us horror fans can identify with that very well. Second, we chose 1931 Dracula.
That is the ultimate date movie. I mean,
Yes.
You can't really say much else about it.
Anything with vampires.
Bela Lugosi is very seductive.
And then, lastly, for our honorable mentions, we chose Bram Stoker's Dracula.
Francis Ford Coppola's Bram Stoker's Dracula.
Yes. And that movie is erotic on its own. Any vampire story, like I said before, can easily fall within this genre. So we just left them at the honorable mentions because it's pretty obvious as to why they would be on there. And we wanted to choose things that were less obvious and lesser known. So let's get on with the list. For our number 5 spot, we chose 5 movies. We picked Hellraiser. And though it is...
We don't have Hellraiser itself, we have
the box. What better way to package Hellraiser? So, though many people are fully aware of the movie Hellraiser and why it would be the best date night movie, we've kind of come up with our own reasoning as to why.
I mean, it doesn't really get any... It's very self-explanatory, just because if you think about the concept itself, it just practically revolves around sex and death. That's basically the movie. You could go into details of it, but just to give it like a quick, overall just summary of it, it is sex and death.
It is.
No matter what, you come back from the dead and you still want some.
Yeah, and I want to say that was one of the first movies we talked about as far as what we'd like to watch together. Hellraiser. So if you haven't seen it yet...
where have you been?
Yeah, I was going to say, what are you doing?
What are you... Better think about where your life is going.
Yeah, if you call yourself a horror fan and you have not seen Hellraiser... Yeah.
Plus, I mean, you can't
just go and watch it.
You can't deny the very S&M vibe of the Cenobites and how bored they are with pleasures of sex and death.
Yeah, they're literally just all monotonous.
Goth as fuck.
Goth as fuck. Alright, so moving on to our next movie, we chose Necromantic.
Oh yeah.
Now, how do we go about speaking of this film? I do admit that this is extreme cinema. It is, it basically says it in its name of, what it centers around, and it is a movie about necrophilia. But on a deeper level, this is a story about... Here you go. I'm sorry. I get really blushy when it comes to this movie. It's definitely a good date night movie.
It's a very ambitious film. It really is. And for the time that it was created, It was very shocking. To this day, if you're
I
not
would
used to anything like that, it is very
I would
shocking.
say it's still very shocking.
Honestly, it's just a really good story about a guy and girl who are very obsessed with the macabre and death. And this guy brings home a corpse. This woman falls in love with the corpse and leaves the guy for the corpse.
Yeah, and like, you know, it's got very straightforward necrophilia scenes with necrophilia. And you know, if you yourself and your partner are into the macabre, what better way to you know, set the mood than with this movie? You know, and then it all comes down to this very beautiful end. That would only be the answer to this guy's infatuation. So, this movie, we were going to say, isn't a very easy movie to come across. You're not gonna like. I think it was on some streaming service, you know, probably last year. I think it was on Hulu, but it's not on there anymore. It might be a little.
Shudder though.
You
can
okay.
Find it on Shudder.
Yeah,
that's actually how I saw it the first time.
All right, yeah. So it is on a streaming service. Shudder itself is definitely worth it if you are a true horror fan. There's tons of stuff to watch on there.
Yeah.
So go ahead, you know, subscribe to Shudder. It's $4.99 to even just check out this movie because it is
$5 for a month full of horror.
You can't get any better than that.
Yeah.
Okay, moving on to our next film.
Some a little less talked about.
Yes, definitely. I don't think I've ever heard this movie mentioned. Is A Snake of June.
There you go.
So, you can go on with that.
So, I saw this movie years back, and it interested me a lot just because I read about it in Rue Morgue. And when I saw it the first time, I was just completely amazed with the cinematography of it, how beautiful everything is, and the storyline is really it's really good. It's very engaging, and it keeps you sucked into where this whole thing is going. And the ending is very suiting for it, and it's very tragic in a beautiful way.
It is a very tragic movie, and this is you know, an erotic thriller.
Yes.
It deals with concepts like voyeurism, you know, like the whole stalking aspect. It's very creepy, but also it has this really tragic reason as to why this guy is stalking this woman, and why he does the things that he does. And it's a very beautiful ending, and definitely definitely a great one to put on that for that date night.
It is sleazy, but
there's a lot of it that's
plays
implied.
to
It's
the
not
actual story itself.
Yeah.
It's they don't show you much. Like, it's not like one of these things where it's just like really in your face and really just like, yeah, this is like
that's not the point of the
exploitation.
movie.
Yeah.
A lot of what happens is implied, and I think that was literally the best way to go about doing this movie, especially because it could have gone there, but it doesn't, and it really keeps this actually like really tragic story.
Yeah.
But
and best,
really good
the
one.
highlight is robotic snake tentacle penis. Not really.
You just gotta see it. That's not the main point in the movie, but it's a really fun scene where you're just like, wow, Japan, you're weird.
Long story short, if you want a film that looks very beautiful, has a really engaging story, and tackles things such as being an exhibitionist or voyeurism or just being disconnected, it's a really good movie. And it's just a I always have to go back to the cinematography because of the fact that it's monochromatic blue tint, and it plays well to the atmosphere of the film, the atmosphere of Japan, and just what's going on between these three characters, because it really does focus on three characters: the husband, the wife, and the stalker.
Yeah.
And I really love it. I would highly recommend it.
For anyone that loves film,
kinda going
should
off on
see this movie.
I agree.
So on to our next one.
On to our next one.
Our next pick, which would be the number 2 spot, is Cronenberg's Crash. And we're not talking about Crash the drama, though this is dramatic.
It's a very dramatic movie.
This movie is messed up. And
it is horror on a whole different level.
This is, you want to talk about psychological horror, you can put on any Cronenberg movie, but I think so far of any of Cronenberg's movies, this has to be the coldest and the most realistic portrayal of any fetish type thing that I've ever seen anybody do.
It's frightening.
Yeah, it's on a very analytical level. We were talking about this yesterday after having watched it, and we were just saying that Cronenberg comes off as, like, after seeing this especially, he always comes off as this, like, basically, like, someone who wanted to go into psychology and started making films. Like that therapist that was like, you know what, like, I understand the human mind better than anyone. Why the hell wouldn't I put it on film? So, yeah, this one's, I gotta say that, you know, it is slow burning, and you may not get the resolution you're looking for in the movie, but it's a very beautiful movie if you just like cold realism. So the entire movie centers around people that have a fetish with car crashes.
With cars in general.
Yeah, cars in general. But it's like, you know, in the title, Crash, you know, that's what the fetish leads up to. Like,
the ultimate car crash, which is like the ultimate excess in pleasure.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like a lot of symbolism for, you know, other things. So, yeah, this is just like a really great one to check out. Like, definitely date night movie for like the scenes of eroticism. And the weird part about it is that
James Spader's hair.
He creeps me out, Robert California. But realistically, you know, you get these sex scenes, but they're so detached from each other that you can't. I don't know. A lot of the time, I was just like, oh, like,
yeah,
this is like kind of sickening in a way. Like, especially some of the things that they do with each other. It's kind of like,
it's depressing in a way.
It's super depressing, and it's like really, really great at showing how it is when someone takes fetishism too far. And
especially a fetish that is so deadly.
Yes, yeah, of course, car crashes, cars. I myself found myself horrified with the entire movie because I absolutely hate car crashes and cars in general. Like, that is probably one of my biggest fears. So I'm just watching this movie on edge. I loved it, but I hated it, and I loved it just because of Cronenberg's representation of like how these people are and how people are in general. It's there's this really you know, it's not really a spoiler, but there is a sex scene where they're having a conversation while they're having sex, but it's probably one of the coldest things ever, and it's just like, this is literally what's running through a human's mind as these things are going on. So it's just super real, and it's super creepy because of that. I don't think you can get colder than that movie.
You really can't. When I actually saw this movie for the first time, it was years back. I was just really on this big Cronenberg binge because I just really loved his work. And from, like, at that time, the only thing I ever really saw from him was The Brood, Rabid, obviously Videodrome, Scanners, and They Came From Within. Like, I've seen those movies, and coming out of those movies and just seeing like, okay, I heard so much about this film, like I really need to see it. And then when I watched it, I hands down thought that that was the most horrifying film he's ever made. Like, yeah, I'm not undercutting his bodily horror stuff that he did,
because that's always great.
because that's amazing stuff. But to get really deep down into something that is very scary, I would have to consider Crash as one of his most horrifying films.
Yeah,
and
it
his
hits on
most erotic horror films he's ever made.
Yeah, it hits on a psychological level so hard that it's like, after you finish the movie, we just sat there in silence and then started like talking about it. But it does take a lot to really stomach this movie because it's so realistic.
It's not a gore fest at all.
No, so if you're expecting anything,
there is some scenes of gore, but it's not the focal point.
If you're expecting anything like his movies that he's already mentioned, like, don't expect to see something like The Fly. Don't expect something like Videodrome, because it's not like that at all. Like he said, that there are certain scenes that, you know, okay, Cronenberg, you're going there. You expect that, but
one scene in particular that involves a leg scar.
Oh, it's great, but overall, don't expect something like that. It's it's horror on a totally different level. Now, our number one spot goes to a very personal favorite of mine, is Tetsuo the Iron Man.
See if I'll pull this out right here. There you go.
Tetsuo. So, you can start with this one. This one is a very interesting watch.
I discovered this film when I started going through a lot of my cyberpunk like phase, where like I wanted more, because at this time I did watch A Snake of June, and I found I forgot the name of the film, but that's where I found Rubber's Lover, and I had to look back here real quick. 964 Pinocchio. So I really love those films, and I really wanted to get more into stuff like that. And as soon as I found Tetsuo, I was in love with the soundtrack. I was in love with the characters. I was in love with the special effects, the story, everything. It's a very amazing film. It's very ambitious. I feel like this is like Japan's answer to Eraserhead. In a way, not entirely.
It's not fact, films. But it's just what he feels personally.
Yeah.
With Tetsuo, we chose it as something that would be a date night movie, because not only is it a really fun movie where there's a lot of what the fuck moments going on there, but it is also the whole story behind this. What I want to say that his character's name is the metal fetishist, and that is who the central character is, and the antagonist. And it's very creepy.
Yes.
Very creepy. There's some like stop motion stuff going on, especially later on in the film, that it's very it's not like the easiest watch. It's disturbing on a different level, but it also has that element of like a little bit of cheesiness, just because of the time and probably the budget as well, where it makes it very, very enjoyable. And of course, as he's mentioned before, and I have to mention again, the soundtrack. If you can get your hands on the soundtrack, do it.
I second that motion.
Yes, do it. But yeah.
Those, I guess, when it comes down to it, it makes perfect sense why Tetsuo is number one. From the whole story itself down to everything that happens, even the ending, like the ending itself is just such a beautiful thing, you know, just those final words. It makes perfect sense as to what happened and everything that transpired during the film. I don't want to go into too much detail, because I honestly feel describing this movie or just describing scenes from this movie doesn't do it justice.
I was going to say the same, and that's why
it's just something to watch.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to go into too much detail either, particularly if we try to describe certain scenes of this movie.
It comes off as either comical or just like insane. Like,
yeah, so you're going to
ramblings
have
of an insane couple.
Yeah, so you're gonna have this like kind of a prejudgment of the film rather than going into it with a fresh mind.
Which is the perfect way to go into any of these films.
Yes. And yes, that was our number one pick. If you want to go see Tetsuo the Iron Man, I want to say that it's also on Shudder. And I can see us mentioning Shudder a lot because, like we said before, it's just a really great app. And especially, like, you know, being in an area where we don't have a lot of access to just going out and buying movies.
The internet is literally the only way we can buy movies out where we're at right now.
Yeah, and there aren't many stores out there that, you know, sell these movies, particularly a good horror section. That's almost impossible to find.
Let alone finding something that is, like, not $40 for, like, the Driller Killer.
Yes,
like, no,
that's
you don't
ridiculous.
need to pay $40 for a Driller Killer. I am sorry. That movie is worth, like, $7 maybe if you want to, like, pay $7 for that movie, but
it's not worth $40.
Would not pay $7. And I would definitely not pay $40 as well.
Yeah, exactly. So if you want to see any of these movies, I'm not sure about Crash or A Snake of June, but streaming services do have these movies, particularly Shudder. So I guess that would conclude this episode of Gruesome Twosome Reviews. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and if you guys have any comments to add, whether you agree or disagree, want to hear a little bit more about the movie before seeing it, even though we're a little against doing that, but we're more than happy to describe them for you. And also, if you have any more to add to the list that aren't such typically talked about movies, comment below.
We're always into just seeing something new.
Yeah, if you have any suggestions for us, go ahead and put it in the comments below. But for now, that will conclude.
Oh.
That will conclude our episode.
And you're always going to hear cats in our videos. I don't give a shit. You'll always hear cats.
We've got 2 now, so it's like kind of impossible to film these things without them getting a little rowdy.
Oh my God.
Okay.
Exactly.
So we have to go for now and deal with some cats, but until next time.
We hope you enjoy our picks.